On today's episode, I talk to you about the effect on body composition of being in a caloric surplus and being in a caloric deficit. So most of you already understand the concept of caloric surplus and caloric deficit. Just as a quick refresher, caloric surplus is when you consume more calories than your body requires within a given time period, whereas caloric deficit is when you consume less calories than your body requires within a given time period. What I wanted to discuss in today's episode of MJ Everyday is the primary goal of being in a caloric surplus from a body composition perspective. So why do you want to be in caloric surplus? What's the goal of that? Why do you want to be in deficit? What's the primary goal of that? But then also discuss the side effect on body composition, or I guess the kind of unwanted effect on body composition of being in surplus, being in deficit. So before we get stuck into, I'm going to start with surplus, but before we get stuck into surplus, body composition or improving body composition is all about building lean muscle tissue on one side and reducing excess body fat on the other side. So we're trying to build as much lean muscle as we can, get our body fat as low as we can, and we say that is the goal of improving this concept of body composition. So when we apply that to caloric surplus, it's going to come as no surprise that the primary purpose of being in a caloric surplus from a body composition perspective is to give our bodies the excess calories to be able to build lean muscle with. So we're really talking about building lean muscle, and that's really the primary goal of purposely going into a caloric surplus. However, the side effect, I guess the unwanted effect on body composition of being in a caloric surplus is that there's a chance those excess calories can be used to increase body fat levels. So while it's fantastic, surplus is fantastic for building lean muscle mass, we want to kind of keep this effect on elevating body fat as low as we possibly can. And the way we do that is to be in a very slight caloric surplus. So we're giving our body the excess calories it needs to build that lean muscle, to rest, recover, repair, and re-heal the muscle tissue and build it and build lean muscle. But we're not giving our body too many calories where it's so far in caloric surplus that primary goal of building lean muscle from a body composition perspective is offset because we're putting on so much body fat that our body composition is actually not improving, it's actually getting worse because we're too far in this caloric surplus. If we flip the switch and we then look at caloric deficit, obviously, the primary goal from a body composition perspective of being in caloric deficit is to lose body fat, is to get the body fat level down. That's what we're trying to do. That's the whole purpose of dieting, of being purposely in caloric deficit. But the flip side of that is that not only is our body going to reduce the amount of fat that we carry, the amount of body fat, but it's also going to reduce the amount of lean muscle tissue as well. So we've got, on one hand, a reduction in body fat levels, fantastic for body composition, but at the same time, we've got this reduction in lean muscle tissue, which is bad for body composition. It's against what we're trying to achieve through improving body composition. The best way to stop that happening, to stop that side effect of a reduction in lean muscle tissue, is not to be so far in caloric deficit that our body is not only going to attack body fat as a source of energy, but it's going to attack muscle tissue as well, because we're giving the body absolutely no choice. So we don't want to be so far in deficit that our body effectively goes into survival mode and starts chewing up all of this lean muscle tissue, because that's going to have, once again, a negative effect on body composition. We can be losing all this body fat very quickly, but we're also losing all this lean muscle tissue very quickly. So the two kind of offset each other, and we don't improve body composition at all. We may even get, a reduction in ideal body composition. So the common trend here, guys, is, I guess, really, it depends what your goal is at a given point in time, whether you're going to be in, if your goal is to build lean muscle tissue, you're going to be in surplus. If your primary goal is to reduce body fat, you're going to be in deficit. But either way, I guess kind of the take-home message of this episode of MJ Everyday is not to be so far in caloric surplus that you're going to offset that increase in lean muscle tissue by putting on too much body fat, or not to be too far in caloric deficit that you're going to offset the reduction in body fat by losing too much lean muscle tissue. Then also the question, I guess, that kind of follows on from that is, okay, how far should we be in caloric? If we know our maintenance caloric intake, if we know that, this is the maintenance caloric intake where we don't gain weight, we don't lose weight, that's maintenance caloric intake. How far above that do we go to be in sufficient caloric surplus to build lean muscle tissue, but not so far that we're going to increase body fat? Or how low below that do we go to be in sufficient caloric deficit that we're losing body fat, but we're not so far in caloric deficit that we're going to start chewing into a massive amount of lean muscle tissue? So my rule of thumb here, guys, is 10% either way. So if you know your maintenance caloric intake, let's say, for example, is 2,000 calories, and you want to push into caloric surplus because your primary goal is to build that lean muscle tissue, I would go no more than 2,200 calories to begin with. So 10% caloric surplus. Whereas if your main goal is to reduce body fat, I would go no lower than 1,800 calories. So a 10% reduction from your maintenance caloric intake is where I would start that caloric deficit. Guys, that's a wrap for today's episode of MJ Everyday, the effect on body composition of being in caloric surplus, being in caloric deficit, the side effect of either one of those two, and where I believe you should start to make sure that you're maximizing the primary effect of being in surplus or deficit and minimizing the side effect of being in surplus or deficit when it comes to body composition. As always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn your post notifications on, both on your mobile, your cell phone, and your desktop PC, so you don't miss a beat when it comes to the Massive Joes YouTube channel. Until tomorrow, I'm coming to you from MassiveJoes.com. Stay massive.
Thank you for tuning in to this video. We hope you enjoyed watching. Don't forget to check out our latest upload and our recommended video, and be sure to subscribe to the Massive Joes YouTube channel to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads.